Thursday, September 4th, market analysis, Stan Ehrlich. We have another strong day in the stock indexes and approaching new historic highs in some cases. The Spider E-mini in particular, which I was not expecting. It does put a different light on things unless we turn immediately, and that doesn't look likely. We're not overbought. We're right up against previous highs. This has been a stair-stepping up market, so I have to think there's the expectation of a slight new high, another 5 or 10 points above today's high and close right near the high of the day. And unless it turns around immediately, then we would have some sort of a top. Nothing particularly recognizable, but when you can't get up above resistance areas and stay there and make some more upside progress, that's an indication the market is losing momentum, losing strength, topping out probably. I don't see that. I expected to see it, and I don't see it. Kind of disappointing. The low earlier this week was challenging significant support. I talked about that, but I thought it was going to get broken. And now, not so sure. If you don't know what you're doing, shut up for the moment. I do know what I'm doing, but I got to get in sync here. We're going to look at the SPY. This is approximately the highest close for the whole trend. Historic, give or take a little. No gaps to go back down and close. That was closed pretty perfectly yesterday. You realize it opened high enough to close the gap above from the previous day, came right back down to the previous day's high, Tuesday, and then turned right around and started to make new highs for the day yesterday, closing on a strong note. That is not particularly bearish action. And then we end up with a little over 5 points today. Pretty good. That's a decent amount of ground covered in 2 days since it almost made new lows for weeks, just Tuesday. So, volatility is increasing. Watch for reversals, but I've got to think it could pop up a bit more. Not necessarily a huge, big, sharp rally, because I think whatever it's going up on is kind of getting built into the market. And I assume that's interest rates going down somewhat during September. Now, right up there against yesterday's high on the close, that does not, at the surface, look bullish. Well, it does. I'm sorry. At the surface, it does look bullish. But I'm very leery of these situations. Next, QQQ, similar but not quite as strong. We could have had a downside breakout, and now I'm going to erase totally that theoretical neckline and objective because they're not in the picture anymore. And I'm looking for these two previous important highs, about 576.84, and maybe all the way up to 583 to be tested soon. And if they fail, or we get some kind of bearish engulfing, sell signal formation, whatever, I'll turn back to bearish. Right now, pretty much neutral to a little bit friendly because of the follow-through strength we've seen when I didn't think that was going to happen. QQQ, strong close. NASDAQ futures, almost a new high for a couple of weeks, not quite. Second highest high close in the last couple of weeks. Good. Easy to get higher than the high last week. Bullish. Then the only high of importance is the historical high, and that was made on August 13th. What has happened to my expected October lows coming up? Nothing. Something else will probably surface that turns the market down, which I will recognize, talk about, and warn you what's going to happen. Situation between now and October. Next, NASDAQ, strong close. Very firm. Last significant part of the day. YM. Bearish engulfing is almost dead from a couple of days ago on the YM, but we did not get above Tuesday's high. If we do, we'll probably be pushing new historical highs right away. And it's not quite historical highs. Remember, we had another top way back here in end of January. It was almost identical to the high that we just had in the last week or two. Pretty profound, significant historical resistance. So when you get through that, in this case, the YM could have a very sharp up rally. Next, YM 5-minute chart. What can I say? Russell, one of the highest close, probably the second or first highest close, highest close, but not a new high quite yet. We're still in this very broad range of resistance. So I'm still looking for possibly a turn down, but I don't know. Everything else I've said about bearish has only lasted a couple of days at that. So I got some of these, but they're not lasting the amount of time that I was expecting. Russell, 5-minute. Now bonds, well, could be one of the reasons. New high close for a couple of weeks. The higher it goes, the lower the rates go. And it's an anticipatory vehicle, like all futures are, remember. Actually, all markets are very anticipatory. All right, so new high close. Let's see what it can do about this resistance area. That would be a very bullish breakout to the upside. I'm thinking that it's not going to get through it and turn back down some. Notes, 10-year notes, have already gotten into new high ground all the way back to my original bearish engulfing on April 7th, which did work great for several days and a big move down. But since then, we've been going sideways with relatively flat tops and ascending bottoms, which is the basic definition of a flat top right triangle. This would be considered an upside breakout of that, and that would be quite bullish. Notes. Next, we've got support in crude oil approaching very quickly. We can get a little bit lower and bounce off support. We're not oversold. Still between a rock and a hard spot. Let's see what happens when it dips into support here in the next few days. And we have a little bit of a bounce more in natural gas, but I do still think that this head and shoulder top that I've been talking about forever, still in effect. I don't expect it to be a problem. A little more rally, maybe, slowly, maybe, but I do think we're going to make lower lows, and the downside objective is still very much in force at 1.3. Next, heating oil. Sharp down day. Yesterday was a little down day. Made a new high close Tuesday. This is Thursday. So that's not necessarily always a bullish indication. We weren't overbought. It just simply didn't hold and started to break down. Perfect example of why you have to have protective stops if you had bought this upside breakout and it's failed. In advance. The order should be placed when you place your entry order at the same time as well. Next. Overbought 3 days in a row, 4 days in a row yesterday and turned down today. Even though yesterday was a new high for the trend and a new high close, the overbought condition turning it back. So now I think it's going to test 35, 33-ish. We'll see how it holds and then maybe turn up after that. Next, silver. Again, overbought, turn back down, come back probably at least to 40.35, maybe a little bit lower, hold, turn back up again. Next, platinum. Overbought, turned down to the beginning of support already today. So it could turn at any point, but it might slip back to the middle or bottom of the support area, which would be 12.99, call it 1300 or a little above. And then we'll see what happens. High grade copper, yep, not much. No follow through. All of a sudden back into the same situation it was before. It's gotten caught here between a rock and a hard spot, trading range. Soybeans and the grain complex. Well, now, although beans went down a chunk today, they closed about unchanged. In fact, a tiny bit higher. That could have been the test of support, broke through it, but bounced right back up again like a ping pong ball underwater, let go. I think we may have a turn back up today. Soybean oil tested the neckline and went a little bit below it, but bounced up like a ping pong ball underwater and closed on a firm note, just slightly higher. I think that's a reversal also. Washed out stops and turned around up. What about meal? I can't say much for it. It could turn around any old time. I don't see it yet, but any old time it could turn up. I'm bullish on meal. Corn dipped down a little bit yesterday and tried to drop off more today and closed on a higher note. I don't know. This may dribble off a little bit more still and see a slightly lower level before making new highs, but I'm bullish. I like what I see. Looking for new highs in general. In fact, up to close this gap at 440. Next, I'm very disappointed in wheat. It finally got below my bullish engulfing ER buy signal, which was on August 20th, and did not really have any significant upside follow-through. Disappointing. This was the key right here on Monday of this week, when it had a new high close, but not above the previous highs, and it couldn't have any follow-through and dropped the next day, and dropped a lot yesterday, and today, boom, killed my reversal. Well, I might have picked the first low in a series, but it didn't work. Next, Shell. Resistance stopped it, another down day. Despite the fact that the market was fairly strong also. Resistance is stopping it pretty good. Just a moment. And drag it over here. And that is why, because there's a lot of resistance at that resistance zone we hit earlier this week in overbought condition. All right, I'm looking for something like 71. Next, Apple. Gapped up. Gaps are almost always closed. That was yesterday. We have a new high close, but still overbought. I do expect it to come back down to about 230.80. Close the gap. We'll see what happens after that. And that could be very soon, overbought conditions right now. Sideways, Tesla, not much happening. Waiting for a bull trend line across bottoms to be broken. Otherwise, we're kind of in a bottleneck here between a rock and a hard spot. Next, NVIDIA, oversold steady now on Thursday and today. A doji on each day, basically. There's a tiny gap to close between Tuesday low and Wednesday's high. I'm sorry, Monday's low and Tuesday's high. I think that's going to get closed easily. And we'll see what happens. I think where there's a resistance above the market that's fairly substantial. And as you know, I was, and still really am, looking for a big move down in the stock indexes, but it appears they might make a little new highs first. Next, MES, stock indexes again. You guys have a great day and profitable trading to you.